Hey friends, welcome to the Entrusted to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Danita Cummins, and today I got to speak with my new friend, Jesse Brisendine. He is the creator of Zero Limits Coaching. He's a speaker, he's a best-selling author, and he works with individuals and organizations to help them move beyond their limitations, unlock their greatness, and build their Camelot. He helps clients reduce stress, increase productivity, improve organizational communication, and help them to really experience daily joy so that they can build thriving businesses and fulfilling lives. It was a great time to just sit with Jesse and talk a lot about grief, to talk a lot about his passion for compassion and empathy and helping other people navigate through that space where they can really truly find peace in the present moment despite their circumstances or the challenges that they see. So I just had a great time diving into the conversation with him today. I hope that you enjoy our chat. Grab your cup of coffee or your favorite beverage, and let's get started. Doing things alone is entirely overrated. We all need a community to thrive. And that's why I'm part of an online community of writers and speakers, podcasters, and entrepreneurs called Creatives. And I love it. In the years since I joined this community, I've launched new ideas and I finally executed the dreams that sat on the shelf for years. Seriously. And I was able to do this because of the outstanding group of mentors, exceptional training, and encouraging mastermind groups with my new friends who did and continue to give me invaluable feedback. Oh, and not to mention all the fun, because we have had lots and lots of fun. Have you ever said, I want to write a book? Or do you want to use your voice for the exciting world of podcasting? If so, Called Creatives is your best resource for up-to-the-minute industry training, expert advice, live coaching, and peer support like no other. Best-selling authors and speakers Allie Worthington and Lisa Whittle lead this community with a no-competition mission, and it shows. So join my friends and I in the Called Creative community. Head to my show notes, danitacummins.com/podcast, and click the link to get all the details to join. I promise you won't regret it. I look forward to seeing you in the community and watching you grow. Hey friends, welcome to the Entrusted to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Danita Cummins, and today I am speaking with Jesse Brisendine. He is the creator of Zero Limits Coaching. He's a speaker, he's a best-selling author, has a really cool TED Talk that I listened to about grief, which we'll hopefully dive into today. And he works with individuals and organizations to help them move beyond their limitations and then unlock their greatness and build their Camelot. So he's here today to share his heart and his passion for helping people lead well. And so I'm excited to have him on the show. Thanks, Jesse, for joining me. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Danita. How are you? It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's good. Thank you so much. Thanks for navigating our power outages and our tech issues this morning. So I appreciate it. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself before we get started and your heart for helping people?
Yeah, before that, just to acknowledge the power outages. It's such a funny thing because we're not that far removed from, I can remember just 10 years ago, the first time I used Skype, and I was traveling internationally talking with a friend, and what a novelty it was to be able to see somebody come through in real time, and the picture was a little grainy, the audio was a little off, but weren't even phased by then, and how quickly it's changed now, where if we're not coming in 1080 perfect, picture perfect HD quality with stereo surround sound. So it's quite funny to think now that, this is such a natural part of our life that it's a peculiar thing when something like that happens, the screen cuts off or the picture's a little pixelated. And I appreciate you still showing up and your dedication to your audience, despite power outages, despite technological challenges, because it really says a lot about, I think, you and the space you hold for people and the leadership style you bring to the table.
Oh, thanks. That's very kind of you. That was very encouraging. Thank you. I will take that and receive it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Well, tell us about yourself and your heart for leadership and kind of how you came to be where you are. I know you have a big story.
Yeah. The short story of me is I'm a person, I love professional wrestling, buffets, finding silver linings in situations. And I really, truly love people. I think so much of my work has been about really holding a space to separate people from their behaviors, especially in this modern world where we're so quick to judge or affix a label to someone based on their behavior. And often those behaviors are people at their lowest or worst moments. We'll hold hostage, and especially sometimes our loved ones, to a behavior they did 6 months, 6 years, 16 years ago, whatever that is. In so doing, we kind of rob people of their humanity. What I find is absolutely fascinating, and some of the work I do, is when we can start to step people outside the behavior, separate the human from the behavior and the behavior from the human, and acknowledge that humans are humans, behaviors are behaviors. Behaviors are something humans do, they're not who we are. It creates this incredible space to work with people and really get to the heart of who they are, what matters, and what's most important to them, and who they want to become. I think that is imperative in leadership, because it's often in leadership, it's rarely a case of a not well-intentioned individual, and it's nearly always a case of behavioral misselection, right? Somebody who comes in, they have great ideas, great ambition, great drive, whatever it is, but electively they are choosing behaviors that are creating dissension amongst the team, causing friction in communication, whatever that is. And so when you can start to work with leaders, people who are overseeing teams, and identify some of these behaviors and build strategies around behaviors that are going to be more success-oriented, it's really quite incredible what can be done and how quickly that can be accomplished too.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that you said behaviors are not who we are. It's just a function of what we do or how we respond to certain stimuli in the environment, right? And those are such complex things. Our responses and our feelings and the depth of that and our fears are so complex and really hard to understand. I think unless you just commit yourself to that self-awareness journey, which I know that you've been on for several years, just committing yourself to hearing your heart and knowing your true self and being able to understand how you show up in the world. And so I think that's very powerful. Regardless if you're leading a team of 100 people or if you're just, you in your life, you're trying to navigate this space that you're in, understanding that your behaviors are not who you are. I think that's very powerful. Do you want to talk a little bit? I know you have your TED Talk, and I mentioned that at the beginning. I went back and revisited that again just recently. And I think you and I have shared, we shared before, we started recording that I lost a family member earlier this year. We ended up losing two of my brother-in-laws actually within the last 6 or 8 weeks. So we've actually lost 3 this year, 3 very close family members. And I know that your journey with losing your dad and your friend, and your grief journey is a big part of, your message. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how your light bulb moment came when you realized that I think you say, what we think about is what will bring about. And that kind of mindset of shifting your focus to look at grief versus looking at the positive side of that. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your perspective changed?
Absolutely. And before that, can I ask, how are you and your family holding up? That's a lot of loss in a short time.
We're super tired, if I'm honest, physically tired.
Yeah.
I sleep this week I've slept 9 or 10 hours a day, which is a blessing because I'm sleeping. But I think sometimes we don't realize the actual physical exhaustion that we go through.
Yeah.
And so all that to say, we're tired and we're trying to take advantage of this new season and just rest, give our bodies, and our minds physical rest. Yeah. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think that's an important piece to acknowledge when we talk about grief and loss, is that our culture is such that we're kind of conditioned to just go, go, go. And how you said that initially is such a perfect example. We just lost 2 brother-in-laws in the last 6 to 8 weeks, right? And it's almost like this comma and let's get into this other piece. It's a huge, huge life space happening. And we're so quick, I think, culturally to kind of rush on to the next thing. And sometimes, and I'm not speaking to you, I'm using this as an example. It's one of those things that really cause us to struggle and linger with loss afterwards. I remember the example, this is such an interesting example. The last couple of years, obviously, being sick has been on people's minds. And I remember going to the store one day to get cold medicine for a friend, and standing there in the aisle in the cold section, everything is picked over. And the only stuff left was Dayquil, the daytime stuff. And it's the stuff where we've all heard the slogan, the daytime stuffy head, nose reduction, whatever it is, so you can get on with your day medicine. Basically, it's subtext for you can mask your symptoms, pretend like everything's okay, suck it up, and just keep grinding away. And what a silly thing, right? Because what we all know to be true is the most important thing we can do whenever we've gone through a trauma or traumatic series of events like you have, a devastating loss or losses, an illness or something like that. All the science will say the same thing, is it's to rest, to give ourselves time to hibernate. We have this incredible biological system where we are able to go and literally cocoon and kind of self-nurture and replenish and restore ourselves. Yet it's often the very thing that we deny the most. We'll take a bunch of medicine, mask symptoms, and charge forward. We'll carry on and overbook our calendars, overschedule ourselves, because it can be really hard or really uncomfortable sitting with and dealing with some of those feelings. And so now to your question about what we focus on, what we think about, we bring about. If we think about what we're talking about right now, if we think about that too busy to deal with emotions, if we think about too busy to slow down and heal, if we think about too busy to stop and take care of ourselves, is it any wonder why that some people will struggle for months, years, decades after going through a loss? Because have they ever really truly slowed down to actually heal? Or have they just powered through and kept going and going and going? Not by any wrong of them, but just because that's kind of what our model is. I don't believe there's a coincidence in that, and that we see so many challenges, especially in our Western culture, around issues of grief and loss and death and dying, and why so many of us struggle for such a unnecessary amount of time after the fact.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was just thinking through like the mourning clothes, right? If we go back into the previous older culture where we actually physically put on black clothing and widows wore clothing, for this year, they were in a state of mourning culturally, socially, you were in this state of mourning until such time, there was a period of time before you passed. But there was the physical representation of that to the world. Like, I am in a season of mourning, right? And so there's pros and cons to that, of course, as well. But I can see how that, over time that's changed. So we don't really do that. I know in North Carolina, which is different than in Oklahoma, where I'm from, or even Maryland, where we lived for years, when there's a funeral or a loss in the family, the funeral home will actually put out markers around the person's house on the road. And so they have signs that says, please, drive slow, family is in mourning. And I was always like, I've never seen that anywhere else, across the country where we've lived. But, when you're driving, and it is that representation where you're getting to the store and you're running late for an appointment. And then you're like, oh, this family's in mourning, so it does make you stop and just kind of slow down. And you're like, you give prayers or whatever to the family as you're driving by, just thinking, man, they're like, let them be, give them the space to grieve. So I think that's really important. I saw your recent Facebook post about the tragedy in Maui, which I thought was very profound. And I think I have two friends who actually live on the island from high school. So I'm kind of watching through their life, their Instagram, Facebook updates, their experiences, which are just horrific. I get to use that word because I think it's relevant. It's just horrific. And you talked about the need for us to show up with compassion and empathy. And so do you think that compassion and empathy is a learned behavior? Is that something, do you think that we learn how to do that? Or do you think that's more of just a natural position of our, where we are? Almost like it's a choice. Do you think it's a choice?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a great question. And I do. I think it's a choice, and I think it's something that we can learn to choose. I think some people could be really innately great at it and others not so much. I'll share an example. As a kid growing up, my mom would tell me stories all the time about my dad and his lack of involvement in planning for birthdays and Christmases and everything. And we grew up extremely poor, but my mom always went over the top in making sure there was an abundance of presents on any sort of holiday. It was, despite how much that would require her to suffer with credit card debt and everything going forward, she thought it was really important because she grew up with nothing and she wanted us to have something. But she would tell me about how it was her that did all the planning. It was her that would write the cards. It was her that would go shopping, et cetera, et cetera. And as a kid, then I learned to resent my father for it because I felt like he just didn't care. He didn't care as much as mom, right? Because mom did all these things and dad didn't. He never signed birthday cards. He never did anything like that. When I moved away for college, I remember, I think it was my 21st or 22nd birthday, my dad sent me a birthday card. And it was a card that, and this was back in the days when everybody, it was the cool thing to print your cards up on the printer. You'd make them at home on your computer, then you'd print it up and send them like that. And so dad had done that. He had made his own card, printed up. He signed it, "Love you, Dad," included some money in it. Being a broke college student myself, I took the money out and then I tore the card up and threw it away because I was mad. I was thinking, like, you had 18 years, 19 years of me being at home to care about these kinds of things, but Mom said you never did. And now it seems like you're trying to just buy my love or something like that. I'm gone. And my very dramatic monologues, as many of us get when our emotions are kind of swirling inside of us. Fast forward a few years later, my dad passes away unexpectedly. And I'm at his office cleaning it out, and I'm in that first kind of stage of loss where it's just a cloud. You feel like you're literally moving through a fog and everything's hazy and you're in slow motion as if you're just covered in molasses, and everything you do seems to be almost like there's this disconnect from your body and your mind and your heart and everything else. Yeah. I found myself sitting at his computer, and I turned on his computer for whatever reason, and it was quite peculiar because his desktop was remarkably empty. Many of us have probably, looking at mine, I have probably 24 file folders on there, and I think Dad had 2. And for whatever reason, I clicked on one of them. And similarly, in these file folders, he didn't have a lot of stuff in it, but there was one file in it that caught my eye. And I just double clicked on it, not knowing why. It was almost like there was some sort of thing or something guiding me to click here. Well, I clicked on that, and up on that screen popped that birthday card my dad had made for me several years before. That same card I tore up in my anger because I was judging him on a behavioral, bias. And what became very clear to me right there was that Dad wasn't necessarily just naturally good at those things like my mom was. They had very different upbringings. My mom grew up with nothing. My dad grew up being spoiled. And my mom made that a real priority that she wanted to spend that on to her kids. My dad always had his parents giving him stuff. And so he didn't probably create that association to bring it over. Mom was great at it naturally. Dad was not so great at it naturally, but it didn't diminish how much he cared and how much his capacity for those kinds of feelings were there. That was just my blindness to see it. So that's a very long way to answer your question, that I think there's some people who are really naturally good at it. And that's not to say they don't have to work at it. And I think there's some people that can be really great at it. And that's not to say that they won't have to work at it too. And at the end of the day, it's a choice. It truly is a choice, because for some of us, we can look at a horrific tragedy like what's going on in Maui, and it can be easier to lean into compassion and empathy because it's such an extreme. Yet those same people who could be so generous and compassion and empathy in that circumstance could be ruthless and withhold it in other circumstances when they feel that the situation wouldn't be the same. Let's say somebody we're getting ready to come into presidential election season again. Oh boy. And we all know what happened this last time around, where we have family members who no longer speak to each other because we gave up right. on having discussions, and we fell on the altar of who's right and who's wrong. And we will withhold compassion and empathy in some of those circumstances because we want to be right and we want to make other people wrong. So it's a really interesting dynamic. I think circumstances play a lot in influencing it. And I think that it's very rare that we'll have circumstances in life, like a situation in Maui, where it's such an obvious, this is where I need to lead with. And more often than not, it's going to be the day-to-day things where we really have to put a thoughtful choice behind it and think about what's more important here, meeting my needs or being of service to someone else.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I appreciate that you shared your story of your dad too. I was getting my eyes were leaking a little bit while you were talking, just because I remember I lost my dad in 2019. And so I say they're like hidden treasures, that he left behind, things that perspective when they're gone. We don't quite realize how much space a human holds in the world until they're gone. And then there's such a vacuum. And I think that's part of that complexity of grief, is because it's like every time one of those new spaces is empty, where that person used to be, or where they're, used to fill that space, and that void comes new. That's why I think grief is such a complex thing. It seems like it just, continues to go through its cycle and stages, because you're like, every time there's a new thing of loss. So thank you for sharing the story of your dad's letter and the card.
Absolutely.
And I think too, I agree with you too. I think We have 4 kids, so we talk a lot about love languages and love tanks in our life and our family. And I try to explain to my kids, like, sometimes we don't see a person loves you to the best of their ability. It might just not look the way you need it to look, right? They may be offering you love for the way that they can offer it to you, but that doesn't, maybe you need to be loved in a different way, right? If we use those, love languages kind of thing. So I think that goes back to that empathy place of just realizing, like, behind the heart of the person there, it may be love. It just might look different than what you need it to look like or what you perceive it to be. Yeah, I think that's really good. I just saw your post and I thought that was a very, I thought the
Absolutely.
way you said it was really important. And, just kind of like, hey, there's a time and a place. And then it started to get me to think about compassion and empathy and where does that come from and how do we get better at it? Kind of like gratitude. How do we get better at being grateful in the moments of every day? And I think it goes back to your initial thing that you said about perspective. So shifting our perspective.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything on that before I move to the next? Because I don't want to, if you had something else that you wanted to add with that.
Yeah, I think it's something worth noting too, just looking at in the theme of separating behaviors from the human. The inspiration of that post was hearing stories about some humans that are doing behaviors that I think are very, what I would call very void of compassion. And the choice I make is to not see those humans engaging in those behaviors as bad humans, to completely vilify them. I think that's the easy convenience that we can afford ourselves, right? It's almost like we want to make people into good guys and bad guys because the ones who are evil, bad monsters, whatever that is, it's something where we can then remove their humanity and we don't have to kind of sit with maybe some of the uncomfortable parts of ourselves, look at ourselves in the mirror, or to ask ourselves a question like, gosh, are there circumstances where maybe I engage in a similar behavior? So what it is to say that I think there's some people that are doing some really, call it crappy, horrible, awful behaviors right now to people who what they need is the exact opposite of that. And who knows, maybe if we're playing the game and we play it in the space of, I didn't put this in the Facebook post because I don't want to get too long-winded on there, but maybe from some of those people who are doing the behaviors that I'm judging to be horrible, in some way, shape, or form in their mind, they're thinking, well, maybe I'm doing a good service. We don't know what's coming from them. And I think that's something that's really important to do is if we really want to truly embrace this idea of humans are not their behaviors, behaviors are behaviors, humans are humans, humans are behaviors are something humans do. Sometimes what that means is we have to allow ourselves to explore spaces that might be uncomfortable doing and remove the convenience that comes with just slapping a broad label on somebody that is taking a humanity away from them, which only takes away our own learning and growth potential from us.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I learned early in one of my leadership courses, I think it was when I went to Chapel Hill, I can't remember, but there was a session where they were teaching about behavior in terms of the environment. So like, it's from an equation perspective, like the function of, the behavior equals the function of the person plus the environment. And I think that's an important element to add to that. Like, because we perceive behavior as character, right? We like through the ladder of inference, like that psychological kind of profiling that we do. So we see a person's actions and we immediately judge their values, right? We go straight to the value of the person. Like you're saying, we don't really know the value, but we do it all day. We just don't know that we do it sometimes. And I think that's an important characteristic that I've tried to keep in the forefront of my mind when I get in the same trap. Like I'm judging a person's behavior. I'm human. It's not a good idea. We do it all the time. Someone else as a snap reaction, when you see it. But when we take that person out of that environment, their behavior is potentially different. And so sometimes I think we judge the person's character. We're like, well, you're a hypocrite. Or if you were really true to who you are, then you wouldn't respond in this way. And I feel like that's unfair to do to the person because the environment is a factor too. Yeah. Have you seen that as you go through your coaching and the things that you've done in the world? Do you try to help people do that? Take the environment is one factor, the person another, and try to help them kind of bend those things, for lack of a better word, like so that it doesn't seem so messy?
Yeah, I think that's really invaluable to do that, to really have as full of an examination as possible, especially if we're trying to understand the whys and then make strategy, which would be the how from that. It's to your point, right? You could have somebody who they could be this way in a particular environment. You hear these stories all the time, right? I'm just a different person when I'm at work than when I'm at home. And well, what we start to look at is when we start to assess the environment that they're moving in and out of, and we start to see what environmental factors are playing out in those different places, you can start to see where those spaces or where those components are influencing behavior. And when we do that, then we can start a solid strategy for replicating what works well in one environment into another environment. And I think that's something there's merit to mentioning that too, is all behaviors we're doing are essentially a end result of a strategy that we're running behind the scenes, right? So, and the strategy is just that, it's a strategy. It doesn't mean it's good, bad, right, or wrong. It's whatever we've decided in the deep recesses of our unconscious mind is what's going to work. We have a strategy for brushing our teeth that usually looks something like walking into the bathroom, opening the drawer where our toothpaste is, picking up the toothbrush with our dominant hand, using our non-dominant hand to put the toothpaste on, and then we'll brush our teeth in the same row. And if you ever want to test this, the validity of this actually being a strategy, try changing one of those variables, meaning try brushing your teeth with your opposite hand. That's the hardest one. And usually 90% of people probably quit before they even get halfway through because they'll run into their gums, it'll hurt. Or, do it in a different order. If you go left to right, top to bottom, go right to left, bottom to top. And you'll find that it's a really curious thing where your brain will actually pause and you'll feel for a minute like, wait, did I just forget how to brush my teeth? Or what am I even doing right here? Because you've taken now what is an unconscious system or an unconscious strategy inside of you, and you've moved it over into a conscious processing, and you don't yet have a strategy for that. And so it's absolutely fascinating when we look at behaviors, and absolutely to your point, when we consider environment in there and the millions of variables that come into many of the environments we move in and out of. For most of us, we just assume those variables are going to be visual. We're not even taking into account auditory, olfactory, which there's been studies that have shown our olfactory, memory that we attach to our smell actually is, I think it's registers faster and is more, and this isn't the right word, but more intense, if you will, than many of the memories that we have associated visually. Isn't that fascinating?
Wow. It is. I'm just thinking through my Aquanet hairspray days when you said that. And if I'm admitting my age, because I've had those moments. It's funny you say that, like where I'm like in the bathroom where there's like this hairspray smell, and all of a sudden I'm ripped back to like 90 something, and my hair is really big, and I've got really big bangs, and yeah, it's a very sensory experience. Yeah. And I'm super insecure, and the boy dumped me and I'm crying in the bathroom. Yes. So TMI, but no, I can see how that totally makes sense in my own life, at least. So yeah, that's fascinating. That's so funny. A little bit
I appreciate you dating yourself. I dated myself with the printer cards. So
oh, yes. No, that's funny. My husband reminds me all the time. He's like, we're not those young people anymore. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. I'll surrender, to the mid to late 40s soon. That's funny. So I think that's a great conversation. I love that. I love the behavior part. And I say that to say, like, people are like, what is this podcast about leadership? Why are you guys talking about behavior and compassion and Maui and all this stuff? But I feel like it's so relevant if we just, understand that human beings are so complex. And like you're saying, that perspective of like, if you have a boss on the other side of the table, or if you have a spouse or somebody that you care about, or a partner, somebody on the other side of the table, it's like leadership is in all of these other places. And it's just realizing that that behavior that you see coming out of that person is a manifestation of so many other complex things at work, Yeah. It's not as easy as just, he's a jerk, or whatever. There's so much more involved with it. So I was switching gears a little bit. So do you want to talk a little bit about your International Sunset Day that's coming up soon? Because I know that's coming up really soon. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and your heart for that and why you started that years ago and what that means to you?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for giving space for that. This is, of all the things I do every year, this is arguably one of my most favorite. And it's funny you post favorite. I know that's not probably the proper grammar structure, but it seems appropriate to really emphasize the most part of it because it's something that has evolved in its meaning to me over time. It started first when I first started to get call it a name out in the world through social media. I thought it'd be really neat to try to build community and have something where we could have people from all over the world share a photo of the sunrise or sunset from wherever they were. And not thinking much of it, what would happen. I think that first time we had people from over 30 different countries, all the US states participate. And it was just really quite incredible because I've always found it so fascinating about, society. A lot of times, especially in our media, we prop people up to dividers. What makes us different? What makes us different? What makes us different? And I've always found it so unbelievably fascinating to identify the things that make us similar. And as you do that more and more, you just see so many times how similar we are. It's just we're swapping out, certain words. The language we choose sometimes means something a little bit different. But even then, if you sort of go down that rabbit hole, you'd start to see like we might be using different words. The meaning behind it, the emotion behind it is very similar too. So it was just really neat to see the sunrise and set literally around the world that day in photos. And a couple years after that first one, my best friend was killed in a car accident. And he and I had started this nonprofit disaster relief organization, which is actually, I'm really proud to say, is over in Maui right now, helping out with the recovery. And the initial piece was to do something to kind of celebrate him and to try to raise money for the organization. And thinking it would just be a one-off, not really knowing how much it would catch on. So it came together as this premise where we picked it on his birthday, which is September 12th, and invited people from all over the world to share a photo of the sunrise or sunset from wherever they were, and to spend a moment in kind of silent reflection, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset in honor of someone they've lost, and then to make a donation to a nonprofit organization that was meaningful to their loved one, or to perform an act of kindness in honor of the loved one or loved ones they've lost. And I think that one we ended up having, there was thousands of people from all over the world participated. I think we ended up raising well over $100,000 for the one organization. I don't even know how much for other organizations. So fast forward now, this is going to be the 11th or 12th year we've done it. To date, we've had tens of thousands of people, I think more than 110 countries. We've had all 7 continents. There was a couple years we even had people from the research stations in Antarctica submitting sunrise photos and sunsets. We've raised, hundreds of thousands of dollars for various charities and organizations around the world. We've performed countless acts of kindness. And it's such a special thing to see people do. And more than that, to hear the reflections people have of spending a quiet moment in contemplation with a mom they've lost, a father they've lost, a friend they've lost, a family member, a husband, a wife they've lost. So if anybody's interested in participating, I have the event calendar on my social media. This is a completely informal thing. It's always on September 12th. And the way the thing works is just wherever you are in the world, take a photo of the sunrise or sunset. It doesn't have to be a perfect photo. I'll put together a video every year with it. And I use photos of gray skies, overcast skies, because this is really just about, more than anything, it's about pausing and taking a moment and just connect and be present to love special memories of someone that you love and have lost. And if you want to share them on social media, that would be great. We have some hashtags in there. I have an event page that people can put them on, and then I'll pull photos from that for the video. And then you're encouraged to do which is form an act of kindness in honor of your loved one, or make a donation to a nonprofit, a charity in honor of them. And if you want to participate in the one that we have ongoing, I have a link in there too. But what I really encourage people is to make this more and more about their people and to support organizations that are meaningful to them, because I know there's a lot of really incredible people who we've lost that were probably massively passionate about certain organizations in a local space that could use some volunteers or some extra funding or something like that to help them just do the good work that they do every day.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love that you've had it all these years, and that's amazing. And it continues to grow, and not from a growth perspective, but I think while you were speaking, I thought the power of that one community, which I think is great. I agree with you too. I always say at the basic level, the human heart is exactly the same, right? We all have the same human heart. And it might look different with our words. Like you said, we might look different with the way we dress or speak or whatever. But fundamentally, we have the same needs. We have the same love, looks the same. We want to be seen and known for who we are. And we want one person in the world to love us no matter who we are, what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's awesome that you've taken something like loss and created a place for community. But also I think you're giving people the freedom to just, kind of release that and celebrate the life of that person. And like you said, our culture is like, go, go, go. When are you going to be done with this grieving thing? You're done, put it in a little box, stick it in the closet. We've got work to do. And you're kind of saying, no, it's okay to take a moment to sit and reflect and love and miss them. So I think that's really good.
Thank you so much for letting me share it.
Yes, I'm so excited for it. And I don't think I've shared this. We have a little thing in our family where we chase the sunset. So I've done that for years, like all the different places I've been in the world. Drive to the other side of like Florida to be able to see the sunset really fast before the night, just as those moments, because it's the only one of its kind. That day will never be again,
Yeah.
And to try to just be present in that moment to celebrate the day, good or bad. And so we have a church that sits about 2 or 3 miles up the hill from us. And you can sit up on the top of the hill and you can watch the sunset. And so we do that sometimes as a family, we'll like chase the sunset, drive as fast as it's legal and safe and get to the top of the hill and then turn on some music and, watch the sunset over the mountain. And it's, divine, I will say. So I'm looking forward to it if
That's
everybody
incredible.
else wants to join. Yeah, thanks. Do you want to talk a little bit about your coaching program and kind of how you serve today the community and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think people, when they come to me, it's interesting, and I'm sure you've experienced this too. People always show up with a presenting need, right? I really want to work on this. I want to accomplish this, or there's to get out of a persistent pain. I'm really struggling with this. My team is lacking in this, which is great. We can do that. What I particularly love about the work I do is it always evolves into something more, and that is people come because they're wanting to really call it optimize their respective performance, whether individually or as a team, a company. And then where you start to really dive in and people give you permission to, kind of invite you into their sacred space, which I'm so blessed that people do this with me. You start to find that everybody's playing this game of wanting to be fulfilled too. And so what my work ultimately comes to is it comes to this intersection where we're building success strategy on what it is we want to accomplish, right? Building our business, creating more X, whatever that is. And then the intersection is always, well, how can we do that in conjunction with really optimizing for fulfillment in our individual and collective experiences, both at work and time away from work? And that to me is the part that, is ultimately most fulfilling and rewarding, is because as much as I love to see people be able to create more success in their life, what I especially love is for the times when people write to me and say, things are going so well. I left work 3 hours early today to go and watch my kids' softball game. I turned my phone off while I was there. I didn't check my email once. I just sat there for 2 hours being a crazy fanatical parent in the stand cheering for my kids, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And to me, that's kind of the bigger game that all of us are playing. But sometimes, again, to thematically, all we talked about, it's a piece that often gets ignored because we're go, 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 run, 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 hurry, 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 hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. I was even talking with a client about this the other day. Oh, we've just been grinding so hard, blah, blah, blah. And I asked, well, why? Why are you grinding? Oh, that's, we just got to keep pushing, grinding, grinding, grinding. That's kind of our culture, right? We got to grind.
Yeah.
It's
right.
Celebrated on social media, respect the grind, hustle the grind. And I asked him, I said, what, grinding, it's such an interesting word, right? Like if you were to park your car and you were to go to a high sidewalk and park your car, would you approach the curb and push your rims right up against the curb and then pull forward another 20 feet while your rims were in contact with the curb the whole time, grinding on your rims? No, of course not. Well, yeah, why would you want to do that? Well, it'd just wear down the rims. Oh, so it'd grind the rims down is what you're saying. Yeah, that would be horrible. It'd ruin them. Isn't that interesting? So something we wouldn't do over here, we went over here, and then I asked him, I said, let me ask you this. Have you ever been to one of those restaurants where I think you oftentimes see these in, the sushi hibachi restaurants where you sit down at the table, they have the presentation there, the chef's right there, and they put on their show to do it. Have you ever seen a chef, a really incredible chef that is just masterful at what they're doing, take a knife out and just grind it down to the point where it's not sharp? No, of course they don't do that. What do? They expertly sharpen it so that they can do masterful work with it. We should aspire to sharpen and kind of move away, in my opinion, from grinding. I can appreciate the hustle mentality we have. And I think in many ways there's a toxicity that seeps out from that for a lot of us, because the truth is that probably 97% of the world, they don't want to be working 97 hours a week and pushing themselves and climbing the top. They just want to be able to enjoy their life more than anything. They want to make sure they have food on the table, their families are secure. And really, until I think that was kind of the human history. It's why so many of us, we've had that experience where we travel internationally or travel somewhere where it's a very impoverished place. We go there and we come back and we share two things. Number one, my gosh, the poverty there was so extreme. But number two, the people were there were so happy. And we almost kind of leave it with an ellipse like that, like it's an incomplete thought, not knowing why, because we're contrasting it to us. How can they have so little but have so much? How can we have so much but have so little? Well, if you think about it from a biological perspective, humanity for most of our creation has been pursuant of survival needs, food, shelter, reproductive ability. So for much of our history, if we provided food for our families, we had shelter overhead, that's cause for celebration. And much of the, I think, undeveloped world is still playing in that. It's a very simple thing. Did I provide food for my family? Is there shelter for us? Is my family safe and healthy? If yes, gosh, what else do I need? For us, we've kind of shifted our model and we've really commoditized happiness. And then social media has amplified it even more because it gives us this platform of comparison. Oh my gosh, my car is not as nice as theirs. My clothes isn't as nice as theirs. My hair isn't as thick as theirs. I'm not as good looking. I'm not this, right? It's always, I'm not this, or I don't have that, or I'm not as successful. I'm not, and which then really fuels that grinding mentality. I got to push harder. I got to work more. I remember working with a client one time and I was asking him, who is your role model for entrepreneurship? They said, oh, Elon Musk. I said, why? Because look at what he's built. And you go, is it what he's built or is it the behavior it's taken him to build there? Because Elon's also once famous for saying he works 18 hours a day. He slept under his desk at PayPal 6-7 days a week, blah, 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 blah. No, I don't want to do that. So then why the hell is he your model? But again, we just kind of blindly jump into those things because we think that we need to all be aiming for SpaceX, Tesla, PayPal-esque achievement. And it's wonderful if that is truly our aim. But again, for most of us, it's not that. And so the fulfillment piece really comes and is often discovered in the work I do with people is to getting a really clear place on what is our goal, what is our aim, right? What really truly matters for us, and giving permission to separate away from almost the toxicity of that grind and to embrace what is really going to be meaningful for us.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I know from my personal journey, like my personal success journey, for lack of a better word, I got to that place too where my kids were really good at giving me, I say my kids know more about me than I know about myself sometimes because they know things about me. They can just sense things about me. They just tell me things. Sure. And my oldest daughter, at a time in a period where I was really frustrated with my career and different things that was going on, at one point I remember, I have it written in my journal, like we sat down one night and I was frustrated about something and she said, "You don't like your job." And I said, "No, I do, because blah, blah, blah." She said, "No, you don't. You think you like your job. You like the idea of your job." And I said, "Well, then what do I like?" And she was very wise to tell me these 5 things. You like these 5 things. You want to help people. You want to this, you want to that. You want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. You want to, blah, blah, blah. And it was really a very, I say it's in my journal, I go back and look at it sometimes, but it was really a pivotal kind of just conversation to reframe my perspective. And then I got to see, I think I'm happy on the inside. I think I'm doing the things, but everyone outside of me sees that I'm not, and it was really that beginning of unwrapping those perceptions that I had about success and what really truly made me happy. And so I think it's really, really important work that you're doing, helping people unwrap that, because you're right. It could be productivity, right? More money, more people, better, whatever, revenue, But the reality is there's a lot more under the surface that is really driving you and what really truly makes you happy. Like you said, where does your peace really come from? So I think that's really great.
How old was your daughter when you had that conversation with her?
Oh my gosh, 15 or 16, 15. Yeah.
Wow.
She's very wise. Yeah. We call her an old soul.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Justifiably so. That's incredible.
Yeah, she was still in high school. She graduated a year early because she skipped a grade. So she graduated at 17. So she had to have been somewhere between 16 and 17 when she said that to me. And I have another friend who has stage 4 cancer who's been navigating that for about 5 years. And I say that I appreciate their perspectives over the years. I really, truly value a different person's perspective because like you said, it's easy to get caught in the trap. It's easy to get caught in that. And then it's like a resetting of your mindset, right? Like for my friend, she's been very candid to say to me, what's next? You keep climbing the ladder and the checklists and the things, you write one book, then you write 5, then you write, like, when is enough enough? And I thought that's another powerful kind of thing I've put in my toolkit, that whenever I start to get in that mode, I go back and remember her saying, when is enough enough? And it really goes back to like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? What does success look like for you? So I think that's really great. So if people want to work with you, how do they connect with you? How do they do that?
Yeah, easiest way, you can connect with me through website, social media. I think I'm kind of mostly active, I guess, on Facebook, Instagram, website. There's contact me pages, all the social things, though, I'm on them. I shouldn't say all of them because there's so many of them now. You used to be able to say all of them and you really were on all of them. But yeah, if you just type my name in, you'll find me. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, and I would love to speak with you.
Yeah, that's really good. And then do you do retreats? I saw something on your website. Is that what you do? You do like one-on-one coaching virtually, but do you also do like kind of like intensives with people? What does that look like?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. It's something so really, really cool. I facilitated workshops for quite some time, and arguably of all the things I do, that's one of my favorite things to do. I love the group experience, especially having the intimacy that can come with a group over a period of time. And one of the things that we're starting to incorporate now is doing these retreat type experiences where it's going to be a hybrid. So it's part wellness, part vision. And really, it's going to be something where a group of people, it's going to be small, intimate group of people get together. We spend a couple days focusing on kind of what's our vision for our future life, business, ironing that out, creating some success systems around that, and then really focusing on nurturing and showering ourselves with self-care, self-love, whatever that is, doing some morning meditations, taking care of ourselves, eating really good foods, doing some hikes to enjoy the sunrise and sunset, those kinds of things, so that people leave feeling really rejuvenated, recharged, and sharpened, so that they're able to focus on achieving the things that really matter and are most meaningful to them.
That's really good. That's awesome. I'm super excited about that. I'm just sitting as you're talking, I'm thinking that would be something I would totally love to do.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Are you doing it at different times out of the year? Is there like a schedule that you have on your website people can find, or is it more ad hoc?
I don't have the schedule up yet. Right now, we're playing with a couple dates in late fall. I think we have the surveys out to finalize which one it is. And then what it'll eventually be is it'll probably be a twice a year thing for these retreats. And then the workshops, now that we're kind of back in full swing of after the last couple of years.
Yeah.
The ones that I do, I'll host it 2 to 3 times a year. But then I also do private workshops for groups. So I'll come in and I do 1 or 2 with different companies throughout the year that are actually my clients. And then I'll usually get contracted out to do a couple others throughout the years with other companies as well.
Very cool. Okay. So we'll put all the links in the show notes so everybody can get on your website and follow that as you announce the dates and things. Yeah, it's super awesome. So my last question for you, Jesse, is why do you keep showing up even when it hurts? What's your why?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I appreciate this question so much because I think this is really important to acknowledge. It's easy to sit in this space and talk like you and I have and have the experiences we've had and give off the aura that we have the answers, we have it figured out, we have it solved, we're the experts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's especially important to acknowledge is that there are many times where I doubt myself, I question myself, I get frustrated, I feel like, I don't even know if I can do it today. Case in point, this was actually happened this morning. I start my morning pretty much the same way every day. I go to the gym, I come back, I make a protein shake, and then I do some stretching, and then I sit down on the floor and play with my cat for about 15, 20 minutes, and I'll drink my protein shake while I'm doing that. And I had some things that were kind of bothering me from the previous day. My grandfather's not in particularly good health and had some conversations with family members the day before about it, and it was just concerning. So it was weighing on my heart. And I was already feeling a little off this morning. And I went to grab my protein shake just the way I'd gone to do 1,000 times over the last several years. And I hit it and it spilled all over the floor. And it's a big, goopy, globby thing. So, it's something, such a simple little thing, right? It's spilt. It's going to clean up. Nothing's broken, anything like that. But the emotion in it was so hard at that point. It's just like that one thing. And then immediately the dialogue starts. Oh God, I just don't know if I can do this. This is so hard. Maybe I should cancel on the podcast I'm supposed to be on later today. And maybe I should cancel this, cancel that, blah, 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 blah. I say all that to say that I think that life is about never getting away from those things fully. It's about developing tools and strategies for when those things come up. What do we do? So the game I play with myself is this. What if today's the day that there's that one person out there who's listening and watching who really needs to hear what I have to share? What if today there's that one person out there who really needs to see what I have to say, needs to read what I write, needs to listen to what I have to speak? And I hold that in my heart, and I really truly believe that to be true, that there are going to be times, or that there have been times, where because I chose to show up despite the stuff, that I was able to reach and impact that one person. And that's really, for me, my purpose, mission in life is it's about impacting. It's about helping people. It's about being of service. And that's what gets me to do it. Not make all that stuff go away, sweep it under the rug, but it gets me to act in spite of. And it also gives me permission to start to run strategy, to be able to healthfully navigate through some of those emotions as they come up, and then refocus on a place of service. But service without sacrifice, I think that's really important. And what I mean by that is sometimes we'll go so into service mode that we'll sacrifice our own health and well-being. Right? Again, we're sweeping stuff under the web, sweeping stuff under the rug. Anybody who's ever done that knows that eventually what happens is the rug gets too full, a big old gust of wind comes through there, and now you have a really big freaking mess. So It's important to be able to practice self-care, self-healing, self-love, whatever the language is for you, but then connect in something that's greater than yourself and how you're feeling in that moment. And that's a really important piece, because a lot of times those feelings are they're so isolating in the moment, and it disconnects you from your role and the larger piece of all of this. So I always come back to that, is what if today there's that one person, and I just focus on that one person. I show up with every intention to try to serve and connect to that one person.
Oh, I think that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's a very encouraging message to, like you said, people when we see adversity or we feel it, even if it's something like knocked your shake over, you spilled milk, you dropped your cup. But those are real deterrents. And we're just, like we said before, we're just human, right? We're all human. But I believe that too. The world needs you to be, to show up every day. I think that very much. Every single person has a light they offer the world. And there's one other person on the other side that needs to see the light today. So I think that's very important. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for coming on the podcast today. Even in the midst of power outages and spilled protein shakes, we made it. So that's good.
You're very welcome.
Oh,
thank you so much for hosting me and all the incredible questions you asked.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It has been a blessing. Well, we'll have to stay in touch, and totally, I want to hear more about your retreat stuff as that goes on, because I think that'll be a powerful thing. So we'll stay connected on socials, and maybe we can share resources or something in the future. So
I would love
thank
that.
you so much. It's been a blessing today. Okay. All right. Well, have an amazing weekend.
Likewise. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. All right. I'll see you later. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Entrusted to Lead podcast. This podcast was brought to you by our amazing producers at Wildfire Creative Company. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please hop over to iTunes or Spotify, subscribe, rate it, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. And make sure you come back. We'll talk more about the essence and elements of leadership on the first and third Thursday of every month. If you enjoyed today's show, you can head over to danitacummins.com/podcast and gain access to additional free resources. But make sure you subscribe to our newsletter so you can stay up to date on the latest shows. Have an amazing day. Talk to you soon.